Have you ever heard the sound of temple bells dissolving into mist? Seen dawn shimmer upon paper lanterns still burning from the night before, their light trembling like memory itself? In these moments, Japan still remembers. Beneath the silence of cedars and the drifting scent of rain upon old shrines, the air is heavy with breath not wholly human. Every gust that stirs the reeds beside forgotten wells carries more than wind. It carries voices. The ancients called this land Shinkoku, the divine realm, not because gods ruled it, but because every leaf and shadow possessed awareness. Mountains were kami, rivers were veins of prayer, and the mist, the mist was the threshold between all things. It veiled and revealed, concealed and connected. In its quiet body, human longing and divine remembrance intertwined until they became one. I am the keeper of the veiled archives, a place unseen by the eyes of modernity, hidden where memory thickens like morning fog. Within its paper walls lie records written not merely in ink, but in reverence. Scrolls inscribed by monks of Mount He, by wandering poets of the Heian court, by priests who bowed to both Buddha and the fox. Their writings tell of spirits and yokai, the strange, the sorrowful, the divine, whose existence lingers between imagination and history. But these are not tales of fear. They are reflections of the heart itself. The fox who becomes a bride beneath falling rain, the faceless wanderer who mirrors our own anonymity, the soul that lingers in a well. These are not spectres born of superstition. They are philosophies written in metaphor. They ask us what it means to love, to grieve, to remember, to forget. For centuries, Japan has walked the line between worlds without ever wishing to banish the unseen. The Shinto priest purifies, not to destroy impurity, but to balance it. The Buddhist monk chants, not to escape sorrow, but to comprehend its depth. Between their voices rises the breath of the mist, eternal, compassionate, unresolved. And so, we open the archives tonight. From the foxfire of Kyoto's hills to the haunted waters of Himeji's wells, from the faceless echoes of Edo's streets to the lanterns that float each Obon toward unseen shores, we shall follow the path where folklore becomes philosophy and memory becomes prayer. Listen closely, for what you hear is not story, but remembrance. The veil is lifting, and the spirits of ancient Japan stir once more. The mist rises, the archives awaken. The mist does not merely descend, it breathes. It does not conceal the world, it contemplates it. In Japan, mist has never been an enemy of clarity. It is clarity itself, but softened, tempered, taught to whisper instead of speak. Before it, even the mountains bow their outlines and the rivers slow their shimmering. The old texts tell us that the boundary between worlds is not a wall, but a weather, a shifting veil of moisture and memory. It is through this veil that the unseen comes near, not to frighten, but to remember us. When I walk the corridors of the veiled archives at dawn, the paper walls are so thin that the mist itself presses against them. It seeps through like breath against skin, carrying the faint scent of pine resin and the echo of temple bells from the valley below. I have learned to listen when it arrives. The old calligraphers believed that the ink of history does not dry, it condenses. Every forgotten story becomes vapor, rising from the warmth of human emotion into the cool air of time. When enough sorrow gathers, it forms a cloud. And when that cloud descends, we call it mist. In ancient cosmology, this was the most delicate of all boundaries, the liminal hush. The world of the living, Utsushio, and the hidden realm, Kakuryo, do not oppose each other. They overlap like brushstrokes on wet paper. To the Shinto priest, the mist is the space where kami travel. To the Buddhist monk, it is the realm of mujo, impermanence, where forms are born, dissolve, and return without regret. In this shared understanding lies Japan's quiet genius, the belief that mystery is not chaos, but continuity. There are records from the Enjishiki of the 10th century describing dawn rituals performed when fog enveloped the shrines. Priests would stand barefoot before the torii gates and recite purification prayers to the breath between worlds. No one feared the mist. They bowed to it. To them, it was a mirror through which gods could look gently upon humankind, not to judge, but to remember that we too were once divine. The peasants of old provinces, Mino, Iga, Totori, told simpler tales, but of the same wisdom. They said that in the mist you could meet those who had died but were not gone. Lovers lost in the wars might brush past each other in the fog of a mountain path, neither fully real, neither entirely gone. When the air cleared, the world resumed, yet something in it had changed. It had been touched by tenderness invisible to the sun. In the Heike Monogatari, there is a passage that scholars often overlook. A warrior, weary from battle, removes his helmet in the morning mist and hears the faint chanting of the sutra for the dead. When he turns, there is no monk. The sound is the wind moving through reeds. But he feels peace. For in that moment, the boundary is merciful. The dead are not elsewhere. They are near, woven into the moisture that the living breathe. The boundary of mist is not a line we cross, but a recognition. It reminds us that perception is limited not by blindness, but by the refusal to soften our gaze. Modern minds often seek precision, the sharpness of daylight, the dominance of certainty. Yet the ancestors knew another kind of truth, that what is blurred may be more complete than what is defined. The mist invites us to step back from the tyranny of outline and rediscover wonder in ambiguity. As I write, droplets form upon the inkstone beside me. Each one distorts the kanji I have written, as though the words themselves wish to rejoin the vapor. I do not wipe them away. I let them fall, and in their gentle distortion I see the essence of all that we study. Impermanence made visible. To walk through mist is to remember that all distinctions between gods and humans, life and death, knowledge and mystery, are momentary. What separates us from the spirits is not distance, but perception. When the world grows silent enough, even the unseen begins to speak. The monks of Mount Hiei taught that enlightenment does not come from piercing the fog, but from becoming one with it. The goal was never to escape the world, but to see it differently, to understand that every breath contains echoes of the divine. Perhaps this is why the mist returns each morning, uninvited yet never unwelcome. It is the world's way of teaching humility. Outside, the valley has disappeared entirely beneath the pale sea of cloud. Only the sound of a bell drifts upward, dissolving as it rises. Somewhere within that sound, another voice stirs, older, softer, remembering what the sun forgets. Soon I will open another scroll. Its pages are damp with the breath of centuries, and upon them lies the origin of the spirits themselves, those whom the people of old called yokai. The mist thickens, the boundary trembles. The stories begin to take shape. When the mist settles long enough to take on shape, it remembers faces, and from those faces, the first yokai were born. In the stillness of the archives, I unroll a scroll so ancient that the paper has thinned into translucence. Its title reads simply, Yaonoji, Chronicle of the Bewitching. It does not speak of demons or gods, but of emotions that refuse to die. The ancients did not believe yokai to be monsters. They called them ayakashi, mononoke, or maribito, visiting presences, momentary disturbances in the great rhythm of the world. Where the West spoke of sin and damnation, Japan saw imbalance, a ripple in harmony. For them, every sorrow, every forgotten promise, every act left unresolved created an echo. That echo, if left unanswered, found form. The earliest mention lies within the Kojiki, 712 CE, Japan's oldest chronicle. In its creation myth, even the gods themselves faltered. When Izanami died giving birth to the fire deity Kagutsuchi, her grief and rage birthed pollution, Kigare. Out of that corruption arose vengeful spirits, neither divine nor mortal. The priests who cleansed the land of impurity did not destroy these remnants, they pacified them. From that moment forward, the idea of yokai carried not evil, but memory, the residual presence of emotion that nature refused to erase. As centuries unfolded, the human heart became more complex, and with it, the landscape of the unseen. During the Heian period, when courtly life in Kyoto was a mirror of silk and sorrow, the capital itself seemed to generate spirits. Jealousy and unrequited love, grief from premature death, the cruelty of hierarchy, all became fuel for manifestation. The scholar Abe no Seimei, master of Onmyodo, the yin-yang way, wrote that when emotion exceeds the body, it finds another form. That form might be a weeping shadow by the garden gate, a sudden sickness, a whisper in a dream. The Kunjaku Monogatari Shu, compiled around the 12th century, describes these presences with both fear and tenderness. One story tells of a woman whose spirit left her body each night to haunt her lover's wife. The earliest tale of the Ikiryo, the living ghost. Another speaks of a spirit that emerged from an unburied corpse to warn villagers of impending famine. Even in terror there was mercy. The yokai appeared not to destroy, but to demand recognition. To understand their birth, one must understand the Japanese sense of impermanence, mujo. Everything that lives is temporary. Every attachment, however deep, will dissolve. Yet emotion resists this law. Love, grief, resentment, they linger, refusing the mercy of fading. When enough hearts resist impermanence, the balance shifts. Nature, compassionate but impartial, allows these fragments to exist somewhere between. Thus were yokai conceived, emotions given body by the world itself. In Edo period woodblock prints, we find their faces rendered in ink. Not grotesque, but strangely human. Toriyama Sekien's Gazu Hayaki Yagyo, illustrated night parade of 100 demons, catalogues them like species in a spiritual ecology. The umbrella spirit Karakasa Obake, the long-necked Rokurokubi, the lantern ghost Chochin Obake. They are humorous, melancholy, sometimes pitiful. Sekien's art carries quiet philosophy, that even discarded things possess memory. When forgotten, they acquire soul. One must see in these depictions not superstition, but compassion. The Japanese imagination never sought to exile the strange. It gave it a home. The yokai are fragments of moral education, mirrors to remind the living of balance. The faceless Nopperabo, for example, warns against vanity and deceit, reflecting the emptiness of the self. The kitsune, sly yet devoted, embodies transformation through love and illusion. The kappa, dwelling in rivers, teaches respect for nature's boundaries. In each tale, fear is only a doorway toward understanding. The Buddhist monks of Nara spoke of hungry ghosts, gaki, beings tormented by insatiable desire. Yet in Japan, these were never entirely foreign or accursed. Offerings were made during sagaki rituals to soothe them, not banish them. The teaching was clear. Suffering persists because compassion has not reached it yet. When it does, even a yokai may find peace. There is also the concept of tsukumogami, household objects that, after serving 100 years, awaken into life. The idea seems whimsical, yet it conceals profound humility. It suggests that everything, even the inanimate, participates in existence. Nothing truly dies. It simply changes state. The worn-out sandal, the chipped teapot, the torn paper lantern, each carries the soul of use, the memory of touch. When we discard them carelessly, the world remembers. Yanagita Kunio, the father of modern folklore studies, once wrote, "The yokai are footprints of emotion upon the soil of the village." He saw in them a map of empathy, a dialogue between people and place. They reveal how deeply the Japanese spirit wove humanity into its environment. Mountains, rivers, animals, tools, ancestors, all part of a single continuum. The yokai were not outside of nature, they were its conscience. Here, in the dim light of the archives, I feel the same pulse that once moved through the brush of sekien and the chants of monks. It is the pulse of acknowledgement, the instinct to give form to what the heart cannot otherwise bear. The yokai, then, are not born from fear, but from tenderness denied its voice. The scholar Norinaga Motori once argued that Japan's true essence lies in mono no aware, the sensitivity to the fleeting beauty of things. The yokai are expressions of that sensitivity when it becomes too full to contain. They are the world's way of mourning with us. Outside the archive, the mist stirs again. If one listens closely, the rustle of reeds might sound like sighing, the shifting light like the movement of unseen forms. Somewhere between the breath and the silence, the first of the tales begins to take shape. It is said that when rain falls while the sun still shines, a wedding is taking place among the foxes. The villagers call it Kitsune no Yomeri, the fox bride's procession, and so the mist opens once more, revealing the flicker of lanterns and laughter drifting between raindrops. The rain begins not as water, but as a whisper, a fine silver veil descending upon the slopes of Mount Inari. Between droplets, threads of light glimmer, refracting into quiet fire. The peasants of old Kyoto used to say that such rain, falling under sunlight, belonged neither to heaven nor to earth. It was the fox bride's hour, Kitsune no Yomeri. I remember the old chronicle stored here in the archives, its ink faded to a dull umber, the calligrapher's brush trembling as though even memory feared to describe what it saw. It tells of a spring morning when villagers from the Inari foothills watched a procession shimmer through the distant mist. Lanterns moved like fireflies in daylight, weaving between cedar trunks. No sound reached them, only the shimmer of flame, the rhythm of something half seen. Some claimed they saw the flutter of a bridal veil. Others swore they glimpsed tails flickering beneath silk robes. In those times, foxes were not creatures of deceit, but of divine intelligence. Inari Okami, the god of harvests, commerce and transformation, was served by fox messengers. The kitsune was the keeper of boundaries, the very soul of metamorphosis. To see a fox at the edge of the village was to be reminded that life itself is a negotiation between forms, light and shadow, mortal and divine, truth and illusion. The story of the fox bride begins, as all transformations do, with longing. A young man, his name long forgotten, was said to live alone near the rice terraces of Fushimi. Each day, he carried offerings of millet and sake to the small shrine that guarded the fields. One morning, as he placed his offering, he found a white fox resting beside the altar, its fur glistening with dew. It did not flee. Instead, it raised its head and regarded him with eyes that held not animal cunning, but human sorrow. The youth bowed, murmured a prayer, and left. Yet when he returned the next day, the fox was there again. For 7 days the encounter repeated, silent, tender, impossible. On the 8th, the fox was gone, and in its place stood a woman dressed in garments the colour of cloudlight. Her hair shimmered like pale wheat, and her eyes bore that same unfathomable hue. She smiled, not as a ghost might, but as someone remembering what it meant to be seen. She became his wife. The villagers whispered but did not condemn, for it was an age when the border between worlds was porous, and the strange was sacred. Together they lived quietly, raising children who were graceful and quick of thought, yet whose eyes glowed faintly gold when night fell. Seasons folded upon themselves, years ripened like fruit, and for a time even the gods must have envied their happiness. But joy, like mist, resists possession. One evening, during a festival, the man returned home early. As he entered the garden, he saw his wife standing in the moonlight, surrounded by their children, and there, as she combed her hair, he caught sight of her, true form reflected in the water basin, the glimmer of a white tail swaying behind her. His breath caught. In that instant of recognition, the world shifted. The foxwife turned, her eyes filled not with fear, but with sorrow, sorrow ancient as the mountains themselves. "You have seen," she whispered, "and so I must go." He fell to his knees, begging her to stay, but she only touched his brow gently. "Do not grieve. Every love must return to its source." She vanished with the mist that rose from the basin, leaving behind only her robe and the faint scent of rain. The children, half human and half spirit, wept softly. And from their tears, it is said, the first rain of sunlight fell. That was the day the villagers named Kitsune no Yomairi. Even now, when rain and sun embrace in the same sky, the people of Japan look upward and bow their heads. They say the fox bride is passing once more, returning to her kin in light. Farmers pause their work, travellers cease their songs, and somewhere on the hills, the faint echo of wedding flutes drifts through the haze. But the tale is not merely romantic sorrow. Within its simplicity lies a philosophy profound as any sutra. The foxwife is the embodiment of mujo, impermanence, the truth that beauty must vanish to remain pure. Her love was real precisely because it could not last. The man's grief, in turn, becomes a mirror of the human condition, our endless yearning to hold what cannot be held. In Buddhist commentaries, there is a phrase, shogyo mujo. All phenomena are transient. The foxwife's departure is not tragedy, but fulfillment of that law. Love, once recognized as fleeting, transforms from attachment into reverence. What remains is not absence, but gratitude. In the villages of Fushimi, when rain falls beneath sunlight, it is not a reminder of loss. It is a wedding renewed across eternity. The philosopher Dogen wrote in the Shobogenzo, "The impermanent is Buddha nature. To lose is to awaken, to part is to see the truth of unity." Thus, the Fox Bride's procession is not a tale of departure, but of return, the eternal returning of form to formlessness, of love to light. I close the scroll and listen. Outside the archive, rain patters softly upon the tiled roof. Each droplet catches a fragment of sunlight before it falls. Thousands of tiny weddings occurring in silence. Somewhere beyond the garden, a fox cries, not in pain, but in remembrance. The mist gathers again, as if bowing in homage to her passage, and from within its folds, Another shape begins to stir, the outline of a faceless wanderer upon a deserted road, where even the light hesitates to linger. It is said that those who meet him see nothing where a face should be, only the reflection of their own fear. They call him Mujina. The road that leads away from Kyoto bends through low hills and bamboo groves, where even the wind seems to tread softly. There, in the spaces where the mist lingers long after dawn, travellers once told of a figure that walked with them, silent, featureless, and infinitely patient. They called it Mujina, the Faceless One. It is a strange thing, how fear takes form. In the Edo no Kaidan Shu, a collection of ghost tales from the 17th century, the story of the Mujina first appears not as a warning, but as an observation. The writer, a Buddhist scribe of unknown name, recorded the testimony of a samurai who claimed to have met a woman by the moat near Akasaka, Tokyo. She stood in the moonlight, veiled by her long hair, her posture delicate and still. When the samurai approached to ask if she needed help, she slowly raised her head, and there, where eyes, mouth, and nose should have been, was only smooth, unbroken skin, pale as paper. The man fled, yet before he could escape the city gates, he encountered a sober seller resting beneath a willow. The vendor asked what frightened him so, and as the samurai struggled to speak, the vendor leaned forward, his own face twisting into a similar void. "Like this," he whispered. The tale ends abruptly, as all lessons do. No blood, no chase, only the echo of a realization too profound to name. For in Japan, the Faceless One is not a monster to be slain, but an omen to be understood. The Mujina belongs to a family of spirits that embody Mu, nothingness, the central truth of Buddhist thought. To Western ears, nothingness sounds like despair. But to the Japanese heart, Mu is liberation, the emptiness that allows all things to exist. In Zen, the absence of self is not death, it is clarity. The Mujina reminds us what it feels like to forget who we are, and thus to see the world without the distortion of ego. Yet the story also touches a quieter terror, anonymity. In Edo, a city of over 1 million souls, identity became a fragile thing. Merchants rose above samurai. Artists lived in poverty yet shaped immortality, and courtiers performed politeness as though it were armor. Beneath the makeup of duty and decorum, who remained? The Mujina appeared precisely when society grew most masked. It was the city's reflection, the spirit of conformity made flesh. Toriyama Sekian, in his Hyaki Yagyo Emaki, the night parade of 100 demons, painted the faceless ghost not as grotesque, but tranquil, a smooth oval of pale light against the ink-dark night. It walks unhurried through the streets of imagination. In the margin, Sekian inscribed a single line: "When the heart forgets its shape, the face follows." In the teachings of the Zen master Bankei, there is a phrase: "The unborn mind is clear like a mirror. It reflects, but does not cling." Perhaps the Mujina is the mirror itself, returning to us our unmasked essence. To meet it, then, is to confront the unbearable, simplicity of being, the realization that we are not what we imagine, but the spaces between those imaginings. However, not all who met the Mujina found enlightenment. Some found madness. For to lose one's face is to lose one's narrative. In a world where identity defines worth, anonymity is annihilation. The faceless ghost thus became a symbol of the fear that haunts all structured society, the dissolution of the self beneath conformity's weight. Modern folklorists like Yanagita Kunio believed that the Mujina arose from rural shape-shifting legends, badgers or raccoon dogs, tanuki, who used illusion to trick humans. Yet in the urban imagination the animal vanished, and only the human void remained. This evolution marks a profound shift, from nature's mischief to civilization's alienation. The forest spirit became the city's shadow. A fragment of verse from the Edo poet Basho survives, written in his travel diary, Nozarashikiko. In the fog of Akasaka, a woman without eyes weeps, and I cannot tell if she is me. The Mujina thus exists both outside and within us. It is the quiet question that echoes in solitude. Who am I when the story ends? Each time the mist erases our reflection in water, the Mujina stirs. It is not here to haunt, but to remind that identity too is impermanent. The more we clutch it, the faster it dissolves. I've often wondered if the Mujina is, in truth, the gentlest of spirits. For what greater mercy than to remove the face that suffers, the mouth that lies, the eyes that cannot stop longing. In its blankness lies a strange compassion, the stillness of a mind freed from wanting to be seen. And yet, there is a danger in forgetting too much. Without form, empathy fades. Without a face, we lose the bridge between self and other. The Mujina thus stands at the delicate threshold between enlightenment and oblivion, a reminder that emptiness must be balanced by awareness, just as mist must lift before dawn. In modern Tokyo, there are still whispers. Taxi drivers claim to see a woman waving by the road near Akasaka Palace. Her features blurred, her reflection absent in the car window. She asks to be taken home, but when the driver turns, the seat is empty and only a trace of dew remains. Perhaps she is not lost, but searching, wandering through centuries of transformation, trying to return to a world that has forgotten the stillness she once embodied. In her presence, the city remembers for a moment that beneath its steel and glass lies an older rhythm, one that does not measure life by names or titles, but by silence. The mist moves through the archives again. My lamp flickers, and for a moment, the paper walls lose their texture, becoming as smooth and featureless as the Mujina's visage. I stare into the blankness and see my own shape dissolving within it. From that blank space, a sound arises, the faint dripping of water, echoing like tears. Somewhere, deep, within the mountain wells of Himeji, a voice is said to count endlessly, 1, 2, 3. They call her Okiku. The sound of dripping water is older than grief. It echoes through the stone corridors of Himeji Castle even now, soft, persistent, almost tender. Those who have stood above the well say that when the night is silent enough, the drops begin to count, one by one, in a woman's voice. Ichi, ni, san. The air seems to hold its breath as the count reaches 9, and then nothing, no 10th number, only a silence so deep it feels like the pause between heartbeats. They call it Okiku's Well. Her name first appears in the late Edo period, in a collection of provincial records titled Banshu Sarayashiki Monogatari, the story of the dish house of Banshu. The version preserved there is neither theatrical nor embellished. It reads almost like a confession. Okiku was a maid in service to the samurai Aoyama Tesan, keeper of the castle's inner quarters. She was known for her grace and quiet diligence, and for her devotion to her master's young wife. In those uneasy times, loyalty was the axis upon which every life turned. Yet loyalty, in a world ruled by men's suspicion, was a dangerous virtue. Aoyama, though honoured, was ambitious. He sought favour through a secret alliance that betrayed his lord. Okiku discovered his deceit and refused to remain silent. But when he realised that she knew, Aoyama devised a cruelty worthy of legend. He possessed a set of 10 heirloom plates, porcelain as thin as breath. One evening he summoned Okiku and accused her of losing one. She protested her innocence, but he demanded that she count them aloud. She did. 1, 2, 3, 9. The 10th was missing. In truth, he had hidden it himself. But his plan was simple. If she confessed, she would be spared as honest. If she denied, she would die as a thief. When she refused to yield to his deceit, Aoyama's anger turned to something darker. He had her beaten, bound and hurled into the castle's deepest well. The sound of her fall was said to echo for days, until it blended with the rhythm of dripping water, the pulse of the earth itself. From then on, each night, servants heard her counting from the depths, her voice clear, patient, and unbearably gentle. Always 9, never 10. It is said that the Lord's mind unravelled before the month was out, tormented by her unending tally. Centuries later, kabuki playwrights like Tsuruya Namboku would transform Okiku's fate into art. In Bancho Sarayashiki, 1824, she becomes both ghost and moral force, her grief elevated into a form of justice. Her story spread through the floating world of Edo, painted on scrolls, whispered in tea houses, reenacted by puppets in the dim light of Ningyo Joruri theatres. The people wept, not because she died, but because she remained. What makes Okiku's story endure is not its cruelty, but its compassion. The well did not become a place of terror. It became a shrine of remembrance. Even the samurai's sin was absorbed into the earth, transformed by the persistence of her voice. For in Buddhist thought, vengeance is never final. It is the echo of unresolved sorrow. The spirit seeks not punishment, but acknowledgement. Monks from the nearby Engyoji temple once came to perform a sagaki, a ritual to feed and comfort the hungry dead. They did not attempt to exorcise Okiku. Instead, they recited sutras for the repose of her soul and offered lotus petals to the water. Afterward, it was said that the counting ceased for 7 nights. But on the 8th, a single drop fell, and the voice returned, softer now, almost at peace. In the Japanese heart, this was not horror. It was harmony reasserting itself. The ghost's persistence became the village's conscience, a warning against deceit, cruelty, and the misuse of power. Children who visited the castle would bow before the well, whispering prayers not of fear but of respect, for they knew injustice may sink beneath the surface, but truth will rise like water. There are scholars who suggest Okiku's story carries a deeper symbolism. The 10 plates, they argue, represent the 10 virtues of Bushido: righteousness, courage, benevolence, respect, honesty, honor, loyalty, self-control, sincerity, and duty. The missing plate, then, is the virtue lost in the act of betrayal, the fracture that summons the spirit. Her endless counting is humanity's attempt to restore what it has broken. I find this interpretation comforting, for if her voice still echoes, it means that the moral dialogue between the living and the dead continues. The water in that well is no longer the site of tragedy. It is an archive of repentance. Each drop, each whisper of 9, is a lesson repeating itself across centuries. That silence can be broken by truth, and that remembrance is the gentlest form of justice. When I visited Himeji years ago, I stood by the well at dusk. The tourists had gone, and the castle glowed pale against the twilight. The air was thick with humidity, and the sound of cicadas folded into the rhythm of dripping water. I closed my eyes and listened. Perhaps it was only the breeze, but for an instant I thought I heard her count. Ichi, ni, san. The sound was not eerie. It was patient, resigned, almost maternal. In that moment, I understood what the ancients meant by Reikon, the wandering soul that lingers not from vengeance but from devotion. Okiku does not haunt, she endures. Her sorrow has become a part of Japan's collective breath, a voice that refuses to be silenced until honesty and compassion are restored. The mist curls around the archive windows once more, carrying the scent of wet stone. Somewhere in that shifting whiteness, I imagine her spirit walking beside the fox bride and the faceless one, each a different aspect of remembrance. Together, they weave the tapestry of moral emotion that defines the unseen world. But the night grows late, and the lanterns along the temple path begin to flicker. It is the season of Obon, when families light floating lanterns to guide ancestral souls back to their resting places. Each flame drifts upon the river like a thought released. Among them, some say, walks a solitary light, the lantern of compassion. And so, the next story begins, illuminated by its soft glow. The first thing one notices during Obon is not the light, but the stillness that precedes it. The air, heavy with midsummer's breath, becomes tender, as if the heat itself pauses to listen. Then, from doorways and riverbanks, lanterns bloom into being. Each flame is the size of a heartbeat, trembling upon its wick. They are not meant to dazzle. They are meant to remember. In this season, Japan becomes a threshold. The living and the dead, the seen and the unseen, draw near enough to share the same silence. The Festival of Obon is not a celebration of ghosts. It is a homecoming, a time when the ancestors are invited to return, not as terrors, but as guests of honor. According to the Urubun Sutra, the origin lies with the monk Mokurin, Maudgalyayana, one of the Buddha's disciples. After attaining clairvoyance, he looked into the spirit world and saw his late mother suffering among the hungry ghosts, gaki, those tormented by insatiable hunger. Desperate to save her, Mokuren offered food, but it turned to flames in her hands. The Buddha instructed him to make offerings to the Sangha on the 15th day of the 7th month. Through this act of compassion, her spirit was freed. Thus was born Urobon-e, the festival of returning souls. The villagers of ancient Kyoto believed that during Obon, the river of the afterlife reversed its current, allowing spirits to journey home. Lanterns were lit to guide them, floating upon water, hanging from eaves, glowing like fragments of moonlight. Even now, in Gion and Arashiyama, you can see them drifting in long ribbons of gold, carried by the slow breath of the Kamo River. As the veiled archives hum with the faint murmur of evening rain, I unroll a scroll describing an event from the 15th century, the Toro Nagashi of Nara. It tells of a widow named Sayo who lit a lantern for her husband, lost in war. Each night she wrote his name upon a strip of mulberry paper and set it afloat. For years she returned, her lantern joining countless others until the river itself resembled a constellation in motion. One night the wind shifted, and her lantern turned upstream against the current. The villagers gasped, for it is said that when a lantern moves against the flow, it bears a message. On its side, the flame flickered once, brightened, and then vanished. From that day, Sayo no longer came to the river. "He has found his way," she said simply. The scholars of folklore debate whether the tale is literal or metaphor, yet its truth lies beyond argument. Obon is not about appeasement, it is about reconciliation. Where Western rites of mourning seek to seal the boundary between the living and the dead, Obon opens it, gently, respectfully, so that love may circulate freely once more. To the Japanese heart, grief is not something to overcome. It is something to integrate. The lanterns do not banish darkness, they give it shape, a soft edge that glows. In Buddhist philosophy, this act is a form of dana, giving, and in the giving, both giver and receiver are purified. There is a saying from the poet Saigyo, "Even in death, the heart returns to its source, like the lamp returning to the dawn." I have often wondered what it means for light to remember its source. Perhaps the flame that burns upon each lantern is not just fire, but a distillation of affection, regret, and gratitude, emotions refined into clarity. The ritual itself becomes a conversation across time. "I have not forgotten you." And from the other shore, perhaps, a whisper replies, "Nor I you." The mist beyond the archive's window shifts, tinted faintly gold by unseen flames. Somewhere in the valley, families are placing their lanterns upon the water. I imagine them kneeling, faces illuminated from below, 1,000 reflections of the same longing. Children who never knew their ancestors bow beside grandparents who will soon join them. Each generation folds into the next, as gently as waves merge on the river's surface. Anthropologists like Yanagita Kunio observe that Obon embodies the essence of Kizuna, the invisible bonds that unite the living and the dead. It is a communal act of remembrance that reaffirms continuity rather than separation. To honor the dead, he wrote, is to confess that we too are impermanent. The lanterns are therefore not offerings to others, but to ourselves. To the future dead, we will one day become. As night deepens, the lanterns drift farther, their lights diminishing into the horizon until the river becomes indistinguishable from the stars. For a brief moment, heaven and earth exchange their reflections, and the boundary dissolves. This is the heart of Obon, the realization that love does not end, it transforms. Like light fading into dawn, the people return home, doors close, the last lantern burns low before being gently extinguished. The spirits, having been welcomed and remembered, begin their journey back through the mist. And as they depart, they leave behind not sorrow, but serenity, a reminder that remembrance is itself an act of compassion. Here, in the archives, the air grows still. The scent of incense lingers, mingling with the dampness of night. I bow before the manuscripts, whispering a prayer for all whose names are faded. The candle before me flickers once, its flame bending as if to listen. Tomorrow, the mist will rise again. The spirits will recede, but not vanish. They dwell in the pauses between breaths, in the quiet of the ink, in the trembling of water on stone. I write one final note upon the scroll before me. To remember is to give form to love. To forget is to lose its light. The river of lanterns has vanished into darkness, but in its wake, something remains. An afterglow that seeps into the soul, soft as the first sigh of morning. The mist shifts once more, gathering itself into new shapes, for remembrance too must yield to reflection. From within its depths, I sense the narrator's voice returning, not to recount a tale, but to interpret them all, to weave meaning from the threads of foxfire, facelessness, wells, and light. Thus begins the reflection. Mist is not water lost to the sky. It is water remembering. It holds within its delicate body the echoes of rain, the warmth of breath, and the sighs of every living thing. As I sit within the archives, surrounded by the hush of old paper and ink that smells faintly of cedar and thyme, I begin to see that all the tales we have gathered, the fox bride, the faceless one, the spirit in the well, and the lanterns upon the river are not separate stories. They are reflections within the same vapor, each one a face in the same ever-changing mirror. The Japanese speak of ma, the space between things, between words, between breaths, between the sound of a bell and its fading echo. In ma lies meaning. The yokai too dwell in these spaces, between sorrow and serenity, illusion and truth, remembrance and forgetting. Each story is an aperture through which the human heart glimpses its own shape. When we speak of spirits, we speak of ourselves. Consider the kitsune, whose love dissolves like rain under sunlight. She teaches us that beauty demands impermanence, that love is not diminished by its transience, but defined by it. The Mujina shows us the peril and mercy of losing the self. That identity, so often worshipped, can also be the mask that blinds us to our shared essence. Okiku reminds us that truth is indestructible, that even drowned beneath deceit, it rises through compassion and remembrance. And the Lanterns of Obon reveal that love's light extends beyond death. That memory is a form of prayer we offer to the universe. Each tale, when stripped of its fear and wonder, speaks of the same transformation, the movement from attachment to awareness. The yokai are not horrors to banish, but thresholds to cross. They are the emotional grammar of existence. Where logic fails, they articulate. Where words falter, they breathe. The scholar Motoori Norinaga wrote that the essence of Japan lies in mono no aware, the gentle sadness born from the awareness of impermanence. This is not melancholy, but compassion. To perceive that everything fades is to recognize the fragile beauty of all things, and to love them more deeply for their transience. The fox brides vanishing, the ghosts counting, the faceless wanderer's emptiness. All are acts of teaching, inviting us to see beyond form. As I trace the calligraphy of these scrolls, I realize that the true archive is not the paper before me, but the human heart itself. Each generation inscribes its emotions upon the mist, longing, regret, devotion, and the world, merciful archivist that it is, preserves them. The yokai are those inscriptions made visible, fragments of collective memory returning to remind us what we once felt. It is said in Zen that enlightenment is not a lightning strike, but the slow softening of perception, like fog dissolving under the morning sun. Perhaps the yokai, too, are enlightenment disguised as folklore, guiding us gently toward humility. The fox shows us love's impermanence. The ghost teaches integrity. The lantern teaches compassion. And the faceless one whispers of the peace found in emptiness. Together they form a mandala of emotion, each petal a virtue, each shadow a lesson. There is a passage in the Shasakishu, a 13th century anthology of Buddhist parables, that reads, "The heart that clings becomes the heart that suffers. Release, and you will find that even sorrow has its own illumination." I think of Okiku's patient counting, of the monk's sutras that turned vengeance into peace. Release, not in forgetting but in understanding, is what turns ghosts back into prayers. Outside the archives, dawn begins to stir behind the mountains, and with it, the mist changes colour, from silver to pale gold. The light does not chase the mist away. It enters it, transforming it into radiance. That is how knowledge should behave, not dispelling mystery, but illuminating it from within. I remember the fox's farewell. Every love must return to its source. In that line lies the entire cosmology of Japanese spirituality, that everything, even suffering, seeks home. The yokai are wanderers not of vengeance, but of longing. They travel between worlds not to torment, but to complete unfinished emotions. To study them is to study ourselves, for we too are wanderers of the in-between, between youth and age, memory and oblivion, birth and dissolution. Each time we grieve, we become Okiku. Each time we hide our true face, we become the Mujina. Each time we love knowing it will fade, we become the fox bride. And each time we light a lantern for those we miss, we join the Obon procession, bearing our small flame toward the unseen. I once thought these archives were a sanctuary of knowledge. Now I see they are a mirror. Every scroll, every legend is a reflection of the same longing, the desire to find meaning within impermanence. The mist itself is the teacher, reminding us that form and formlessness are not opposites, but partners in a sacred dance. If the yokai could speak, I suspect they would not ask to be feared, but remembered. For remembrance is the gentlest kind of faith. It neither denies the unseen, nor worships it blindly. It simply listens, and in that listening, the world becomes whole again. The candle beside me gutters. Its flame trembles, then steadies, as if breathing. Beyond the shoji screen, the faint outline of dawn begins to bleed through. The mist, reluctant to leave, curls once more around the mountain shoulder, preparing for its next return. Soon I will close the final scroll, and the archives will fall silent again. But before they do, I must write what they have taught me, a reflection not of spirits, but of humanity itself. What we call ghosts are only emotions too faithful to vanish. What we call gods are those same emotions, finally at peace. The mist thins, and I glimpse the valley below, fields, glistening with dew, villagers beginning their morning tasks. The world, still wrapped in half-light, feels newly born. Yet even now, I sense the presence of those who linger, not as shadows, but as gentleness. It is time to return to the present. The mist will soon lift entirely, revealing what endures after all stories fade. The mist has thinned, but it has not vanished. It lingers across the lowlands as if reluctant to leave, a pale veil resting upon rice fields and telephone wires alike. The world outside the archives hums with engines and electricity, yet the quiet rhythm of the past persists beneath it, a subtler current, unheard but enduring. People often speak of modernity as light conquering darkness, science dispelling superstition. Yet as I walk through Kyoto's early morning streets, past vending machines glowing like miniature shrines, I cannot help but feel that the yokai have not disappeared. They have merely adapted their forms. In the reflection of train windows, I glimpse faces that blur and dissolve before I can name them. The Mujina reborn in the digital age, where identity flickers like pixels and our masks multiply faster than our truths. We curate our reflections until they no longer resemble the soul beneath. The faceless spirit no longer waits by the moat of Edo. It scrolls endlessly through our mirrors, reminding us that the loss of self is not always mystical. Sometimes it is chosen. And the fox bride, she walks among us still. She is the shimmer of illusion we fall in love with. The stories we tell about ourselves and others, radiant but temporary. She lives in every romance begun in haste and ended in quiet confusion, in every idolized image that fades when confronted by reality. Yet, like her ancestor of the mist, she is not cruel. She teaches us that beauty and delusion are twins, and that the courage to love, even knowing its impermanence, is a form of enlightenment. Okiku's voice too echoes in the present, counting through the chambers of memory. Her well is now digital, a bottomless feed of confessions, grievances, and forgotten cries for truth. The missing plate has become the missing virtue, the absence of integrity in a world where deception has grown elegant. Yet her patience endures. Every act of honesty, every quiet refusal to lie is a prayer dropped into her well. Somewhere she still counts. And the Lanterns of Obon, they drift now as electric lights on city towers, glowing over rivers of traffic instead of water. But each time someone lights a candle for a loved one lost, whether before an altar or a computer screen, the ancient ritual resumes. The current of remembrance flows on. For all our progress, we have not learned to live without ghosts, nor should we. They remind us that memory is a form of love, and that love, if sincere, cannot be contained by time. Modern philosophers often lament the disenchantment of the world, the loss of mystery in an age of measurement. But the Japanese never fully surrendered to that narrative. They understood that to explain a thing is not to erase its soul. Even now, in the clatter of neon and rain, the old intuition stirs. That places remember, that emotions leave footprints, that silence is a language older than speech. I recall an old observation by Lafcadio Hearn, the Irish-born writer who adopted Japan as his home. He once wrote, "The dead are not truly gone. They are the soft forces that shape our dreams." Perhaps that is why the mist continues to return each morning, because we have not yet learned to dream without them. When I pass the shrine gates of Fushimi Inari, I see office workers bowing before they board the subway. They may not believe in fox spirits, yet something in their gesture reveals continuity, a quiet acknowledgement of forces beyond comprehension. The divine has not vanished. It has become manner, habit, breath. In the countryside, I have seen farmers leave offerings of rice for unseen guests, and in city apartments, students place flowers before faded photographs. In each act lies the same truth the yokai taught, that reverence is not superstition, but memory practiced as kindness. Technology has changed our rhythms, but not our essence. We still fear what we cannot see, still long for what we cannot hold, still build temples to meaning in the fog of uncertainty. The modern yokai are not in forests or wells. They reside in our anxieties, our unspoken desires, our longing for connection in a world of glass screens. The mist has entered our machines, but its message remains unchanged. Remember that all forms are temporary, yet all moments are sacred. Standing by the Kamo River, I watch the morning mist unravel into sunlight. Bicycles pass, their tires hissing softly against the wet pavement. The world feels neither ancient nor new, only continuous. Perhaps the greatest illusion of progress is the belief that we have moved beyond the spiritual. We have not. We have only changed the vocabulary of our awe. A sparrow lands upon the railing beside me, shaking droplets from its wings. The gesture is small, almost invisible, but in that instant, I feel the same stillness that filled the old tales, the mar between movements where eternity hides. The yokai were never about monsters or miracles. They were about noticing. The air grows warm. The last threads of mist dissolve above the river, leaving the city bright and unashamed. Yet as I turn to leave, I catch a final glimpse of something at the water's edge, perhaps only a trick of light, yet somehow deliberate. A single white petal float upstream against the current. For a moment it glows, as if lit from within. Then it vanishes. In that small act, I understand. The unseen does not end. It adapts. The sacred hides in the ordinary, awaiting those still willing to listen. The world hums, unaware that it has just spoken. Soon I must return to the archives, where the mist will gather one last time. There, beneath the rafters fragrant with cedar and ink, I will close this record. But before I do, I must write the final passage, the one that seals the veil and lets it rest again. The light of day is already at the door. The mist retreats, but the whisper remains. The day has fully arrived, and with it, the faintest sorrow. The mist, once so patient, so generous with its secrets, is dissolving into air. I watch as it withdraws through the corridors of the veiled archives, gliding over scrolls, retreating into corners where light cannot follow. The ink gleams faintly in its wake, as if the words themselves remember being touched by vapour. I close the last manuscript with the care one offers to a living thing. Dust motes rise like spirits freed from parchment. Beyond the shoji screen, the garden glistens with dew. Tiny mirrors holding fragments of a sky now unclouded. Each droplet, I think, is a miniature yokai, a little body of remembrance awaiting the sun's embrace. So ends the night of whispering. The tales we have followed, the fox bride, the faceless one, the woman in the well, the river of lanterns, all return to the place from which they came, the tender emptiness between being and forgetting. They are not gone, they have simply become silence again. The monks of old used to say that when truth is fully understood, it no longer needs to speak. Silence is not absence, but completion. The final note of a sutra that continues to resonate long after the sound itself has vanished. The yokai have taught us this. Their purpose was never to terrify, only to remind that life itself is the most delicate haunting of all. I step outside the archives. The mountain air is bright and cool, scented with cedar and damp stone. A cicada begins its chant, announcing the hour. From this height, the world below looks washed clean. The tiled roofs shining, the river turning like a thread of light through the valley. Somewhere a bell rings from a distant temple, its tones slow and generous, like the world inhaling. I bow toward the sound. In that moment, I feel the thinness of all boundaries, between scholar and spirit, past and present, self and world. I realize that every tale, every vision recorded in the archives, was never about the supernatural. It was about the simple courage to perceive. The mists that veil the mountains also veil our own hearts, and to study the unseen is to remember how to see again. In the Heian scroll Shin Kokin Shu, there is a verse that reads, "The dew, though it vanishes, mirrors the stars for a moment, and that moment is eternity." So it is with these stories. They vanish, but in the instant of telling, they reflect something eternal, our capacity for empathy, for wonder, for mourning without despair. I think of the fox bride's parting words, of Okiku's patient counting, of the faceless one's stillness, of the lanterns drifting homeward. Each offered a fragment of the same truth, that to live is to let go, yet to love is to remember. The mist gathers these paradoxes and weaves them into beauty. As the sun climbs higher, its rays pierce the last lingering veil around the mountain. The world becomes clear again, yet clarity feels almost harsh after so much gentleness. I understand now why the monks sought enlightenment not in brightness, but in dawn, that moment when both light and shadow still converse. I walk to the garden's edge. A stone basin catches the sky in its shallow water. My reflection trembles there, half real, half imagined. For a moment I see another face beside mine. Or perhaps it is only the mist remembering my gaze. I whisper a bow of thanks. "Rest now," I say softly, though I do not know to whom. "Your stories have been heard." A breeze rises, carrying with it the faint chime of wind bells. The sound fades upward, merging with the call of unseen birds. The archives are quiet again, but the quiet feels alive, a hush filled with presence rather than emptiness. Before leaving, I write a final line upon the parchment, the ink still glistening wet. Every spirit returns to the mist, every mist returns to the heart. Then I fold the paper, place it among the scrolls, and slide the shoji closed. The shadow of the mountains stretches long across the valley, and for a heartbeat, the entire world seems to bow. Not in grief, but in reverence. Outside, the last wisp of mist curls upward into sunlight, dissolving like breath into the sky. The boundary is closed, the veil restored, but its memory lingers. The archives sleep again, yet in their silence, something endures, a listening, a pulse, a vow. And if one morning you awaken to mist upon your window, hear a bell without knowing from where it rings, or feel an unaccountable tenderness rise within you, do not be afraid. It is only the world remembering itself.